Hi everyone. Today I hope to demonstrate the effect that sugar has on cooked apples, and I'm going to be using the 2 apple recipes that Courier gives on 325. She gives one for applesauce, and the reason that it's applesauce is because the apples, and I'm using Golden Delicious that I got from Walmart, the apples are cooked without sugar, and that allows the pectin in the apples to be broken down by heat and become water soluble, and it just makes the apples kind of mushy, which is ideal for applesauce. And the other option, I'm going to be making apple wedges, and they're made with the same ingredients, the same cooking technique, except you add sugar. And what the sugar does is it slows down the conversion of the pectin into a water-soluble pectin, and so the apples stay firm, and the pectin is what kind of glues the cells together, and so they're just going to have a lot more structure. And like I said, all the ingredients are the same. I'm going to be using Stone Mill table salt, which is an Aldi brand, Great Value cinnamon, Great Value light brown sugar. And I'm also going to be making 2 versions of each recipe with blackberries. And I picked these blackberries on my family's land yesterday, and I've washed them and they've been in the fridge since then, so they're very fresh. Later you can see them a little more close up. And I'm also interested to see kind of how the blackberries cook and what their color is like, and maybe even at the end I'll do a little experiment with their color. Here I've got my apples sliced and peeled, and I've got them in the same type of pot. One's just a little bigger than the other. And I'm going to add to each of them 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm halving the recipes, by the way, because I'm making 4. I probably won't need that much. And as you can see, the apples in the about 10 minutes it took me to peel and slice them have browned just a little bit. This won't be a big deal for our applesauce. We're not so worried about the color. But if you're making a fruit salad or something where you want the apples fresh and raw, you could sprinkle just a little bit of vitamin C powder or fruit fresh powder, which is really just vitamin C powder anyway. Or you could do a little lemon juice. The ascorbic acid slows down the oxidation reaction that makes them brown. But here it's not going to be a big deal. Here I've added the salt and cinnamon, and to the one that's going to be apple wedges, I'm going to add 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar. Very packed brown sugar. Because I'm cooking them on the stove, I've added 1.5 tablespoons of water to each of them and toss them to coat the ingredients well. And I'm going to use these 2 burners that are similar, that don't have the double ring on the inside, so that they're heating pretty much the same. And I'm going to cook both over medium-low heat. And I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes and check up on the texture as they cook. I forgot that the apples were supposed to be covered while cooking. About 5 minutes in, I remembered and put the lids on. Since they're supposed to be covered, I'm not going to really bother them until the 15 minutes is up, and we're about halfway through. So our time is up, and you can see that these apples with the sugar have reached a nice bubble. They look really pretty. Those are bubbling along too. And so what I'm going to do now is take a slice of each of these and put them on a plate and compare how firm they are. On the right, we have the apple that was cooked in sugar. and it's pretty soft. I don't know if you can see how it squishes under the fork. On the left we have the one that was cooked in water, and you see my fork already has gone into it, whereas this one, it's a lot more resistant. So that's already as we expected. The one without the sugar is more, has more of those water-soluble pectins that allowed the cells to separate. So you can already see how easily I can mash this, whereas this one, it's soft, but it doesn't break apart. And so the apples that are to be made into applesauce are supposed to cook for 20 minutes total, so I'm going to put them on the heat just a little bit longer and then mash them. Now that I've demonstrated the difference that sugar made in the texture of the two apples, I'm taking the liberty to go ahead and just mash both of them into applesauce. And in this bowl I've added the other quarter cup of brown sugar, and I'm going to mash them with the potato masher. And I'll add them one at a time so that I can see any other differences that I didn't see before mashing. So these are the ones that made apple wedges, and they're still pretty resistant to mashing. When I mash them, they stay in their form, but just flattened. And I'll bring the camera closer so that you can see. Mash them. Although they flatten, they don't really expel any, they don't break very easily. So this is going to be kind of a chunky applesauce, which I think will be good. So now I'm going to add the other, probably more squishy apples. They are breaking more easily. Now I'm just going to finish mashing these up. Here's the finished applesauce. I cheated a little and used a food processor on low for a little bit until I had a consistency that I liked. And I'm going to taste it. It tastes good. It tastes surprisingly buttery. I didn't add any butter to this. I think it's the salt and the kind of mixed with the base of the apple just is kind of a buttery taste. But I really like it, and I like the slightly chunky consistency. So yeah, I think it turned out really well. I like having the firm apples to give it some chunk, and then the softer ones to make a more smooth base. Now I'm ready to try my applesauce with blackberries, and I'm really excited about this because I've never had this before, and I'm excited to see how the colors turn out, since in our text we've been learning about different pigments. Blackberries have anthocyanins, which are the kind of blue and red pigments, and as you can kind of hopefully see, these berries have varying degrees of kind of black and blue and red. I'm going to do a little experiment because I noticed just in rinsing the berries that I could see some of the color coming off, and I know that anthocyanins are water soluble. To demonstrate a property of the anthocyanin pigment in blackberries, I've smashed up one blackberry in an acidic solution using fruit fresh powder, which is essentially just ascorbic acid, vitamin C. As you can see, it's very red compared to this one, which is more of a deep purple, and it's a basic solution of baking soda. And so the pH of your food is something to keep in mind when you're cooking, because if you're making something like a muffin with cherries, which also contain anthocyanin. The baking soda can make your cherries have kind of a blue ring. That's something I was kind of worried about when I was making the applesauce, because I knew that berries like this could kind of give an off color to foods. But I think the apples were acidic enough to give the applesauce a nice reddish purple color. So that was a fun experiment to try, and the differences are really striking. With my berry applesauce, I'm going to experiment a little bit and vary the ingredients just a little bit. I'm going to use granulated sugar instead of brown sugar because I think the berries need a lighter sugar that's not as heavy. I really want to showcase the berry flavor more. So that's one change. I'm also going to wait on the cinnamon because I don't really know if I'm going to like that with the berries. As you can see here, I smashed the berries in that strainer that you saw earlier, and it made about a half a cup of juice. This is a whole cup, so I'm going to add about a half cup to each pot. And I'm going to omit adding extra water because of this juice. And we're still experimenting with texture, so I'm going to add this quarter cup of granulated sugar to this one. And as before, we would expect that these would still be more firm. So I'm excited to see how the colors turn out. I'm expecting that this is going to be kind of a purplish red, probably about like it is now, but maybe a little lighter once we smash the apples. So I'm going to cover these up and cook them for the same amount of time again on medium-low heat. Here are my apples after cooking for 15 minutes in the blackberry juice. On the right we have the one with sugar, and on the left we have the one without. And I'm glad that I used this try this experiment because having the dark juice allowed us to see, I think, some more differences in the cooking. So on the left here, without the sugar, as you can see, the juice was able to penetrate the apple a lot more. It's great difference in how much they cooked, I'd say. Or not necessarily cooked, but just how much the structure of the apple changed. So just to stick my fork in, this is much more crisp, and this is much more squishy, like it doesn't even resist at all. And I noticed when I was cooking that it took longer for the mixtures to simmer, and I think that's because of the increased volume of liquid. Water has such a high heat capacity that it just needs time in itself for it to heat up. So I think it took a lot longer for the liquids to heat up, and in effect the apples, I would say, aren't cooked as much as my first batch. So I'm going to put these back on the heat for a few minutes uncovered to reduce down some of the liquid because I don't want my applesauce to be really watery. And once I think that's been reduced pretty well, I'm going to go ahead and use the food processor again to make my applesauce. Because there were so many seeds in the juice, even after I strained it, I decided to just scoop the apples out because I don't really want hard, bitter seeds in my applesauce. And I'm going to strain this liquid through the strainer, probably a smaller one. And I'm going to add some sugar and cook it down to a syrup for something later. And I'm going to go ahead and chop up my apples. So here's the finished blackberry applesauce. It's very pretty. I love the color, and it smells amazing. And it tastes like, really like the feeling of a blackberry cobbler. The blackberry taste is very apparent, and so is the apple. The texture is good too. I like the chewiness of the apple bits. And I would say that I like this one much better than the first with the cinnamon. I'm really glad I tried this. This was a huge success, and I will probably be making this again. Just as a side note, I got most of the seeds out, and this syrup tastes amazing as well.